Hello, welcome to Weencast, Ween Off the Cuff, Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 7, Dirty Dancing. I am your Ween. This week, a direct continuation from last week's cliffhanger ending with Betty and Archie caught stripping in front of each other across their facing bedroom attic windows. And now their parents are mad. Mainly Betty's parents. Betty's parents are super pissed. She's in big trouble. And they're also mad at Veronica since Veronica did teach her how to slut it up. And Alice even calls Penelope Blossom for advice, which is stupid because then, of course, Penelope Blossom calls everybody else in the universe and tells them all about it, so the gossip spreads extremely fast. And Archie's mom is off screen upset because Molly Ringwald only wanted to do so many episodes of this stupid ass show. But Uncle Frank is there, and he's proud of Archie for being a red blooded feller. And so, while Betty suffers the condemnation of her parents and her peers and is forced to join her parents' stupid American Bandstand style dance show, Riverdale Grandstand, Archie is, of course, celebrated by the football team and all the guys for being a real stutterino. So that's what Betty's story is going to be about this episode. Meanwhile, Veronica, sunning herself in her UV lamp in her living room, is interrupted by Smithers, who reads a telegram from her parents describing how she's been cut off financially and she's going to be forced to work at the movie theater. Oh, God. This was an exhausting episode. Anyway, she's going to be forced to work at the movie theater. And Kevin, poor Kevin. Kevin's dad has found his beefcake magazines and is upset. And for some reason, now that it's the 1950s and Kevin's dad is homophobic, he's also country now. Also, he's not the mayor, which is interesting because in one version of the past where the town the past where the town was deciding whether or not to vote to become a sundown town. Back in that episode where Tabitha traveled back in time to every time there was racism in America, which, as you can imagine, was a lot of time travel. She, in that time, which I think maybe it was the 1940s and not the 1950s, but anyway, Kevin's dad was the mayor in that past. But I guess we can't really know what ripples the comet. What ripples the impact of the comet sent through the space-time continuum. Jughead. Jughead gets called into the principal's office because his comic book crime was discovered at the end of last episode, or maybe the episode before that. And Werther sees that, much like Veronica, he sees that Jughead is writing a lot of creepy, weird, stupid bullshit about thinly veiled versions of his peers, which I think is honestly the real problem with his work and not so much the fact that it's like horror or gory. But, it's the 1950s. And Featherhead threatens him with expulsion because he's producing pornography. And wants to force Jughead to sign basically a confession and swear he will never write comics again. And this plotline, I'm afraid, is clearly a gloss on contemporary American book bans, laws about what teachers can say in school, most of which are blatantly racist and homophobic. And so that plotline should only get worse and more embarrassing as the episodes go on, if I have to predict. They're planting the seeds here. This Jughead plotline is really like the C or D plot of this episode. So I think it's not yet blossomed into what a nightmare it surely will become. Having been discovered possessing beefcake magazines and lacking a certain masculinity, Kevin is forced to join the basketball team in order to become more straight. But instead, Julian just bullies him homophobically. Um, but Archie is like, huh, I never thought Kevin was interested in basketball. Wonder why he's on the team. Uncle Frank, why is he on the team? And Uncle Frank says something like, Tom's a little worried his son's a bit of an off horse, a bit of an odd duck, but we're gonna straighten him out. And Archie, beautiful soul Archie, is not quite able to comprehend what is meant by this, but he feels like Kevin could sure use a friend in this tough time. So he starts to offer to hang out with Kevin more often, which mostly just worries Kevin and his boyfriend Clay. And speaking of Clay, turns out Clay also works at the Babylonian movie theater, where Veronica is now forced to work since her parents cut her off. But luckily, Veronica loves the movies and she loves the cinema. And so she realizes actually she would love working at the movie theater and she likes working with Clay, and it's not so bad. Work at the movie theater after school and dress up in a natty little usher's outfit. She and Clay have really natty little uniforms while they work at the theater. And over on Riverdale Grandstand, Betty morosely meanders across the dance floor in a way that offends her parents and Cheryl, and so instead she's forced to dance with Dilton. Humiliating. And really humorously, this plotline about Dilton being the victim of bullying and everybody hates him and nobody will dance with him now that Ethel has been renditioned to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy goes nowhere. Dilton is just made to look miserable and sad. Our heroes don't give a single fuck. It's classic. Jughead, continuing to author his comics, happens to run into Brad Rayberry, his erstwhile father figure, now enemy, that he went through an entire arc about an episode or two ago. And when Brad hears that Jughead has dropped out of school for writing comic books, Brad is like, oh, okay, I can't be mad at this kid because clearly he's stupid. And he has no adults who care about him in his life. So Jughead and Brad reconcile, and Brad takes him to lunch at Pop's and talks to him. Jug, you gotta stay in school, kid. Um, and so they make a plan to where Jughead is going to get a pseudonym so that he doesn't his horror comics aren't attributed to him anymore, which is humorous because he's already called Jughead. Jughead is also not his real name, but he needs a second pseudonym to cover up his first pseudonym, to cover up the fact that his actual name is Forsyth Pendleton. And Brad also suggests that Jughead should pretend to Werther's and Featherhead that he's going to take on writing a harmless, kid-friendly comic book like Super Duck, and they'll be more inclined to accept that he's still writing, but that he's not writing horror. Oh god, I'm so sleepy. It's so hard out here on the front lines of Riverdale. Back to Archie and Kevin. Archie is hanging out with Kevin, trying to cheer him up by helping him with ball. Kevin explains about how his dad is unhappy because he's got an odd way about him and he likes movie stars and music and theater and things and not traditional guy stuff like Archie. And Archie's like, but I actually really like movie stars and the theater and poems. And I think they're pretty cool, Kev. And Kevin understands that Archie doesn't get it at all. But that's okay because Archie doesn't need to get things to be a a real swell guy, because later, when evil no eyebrows Julian is making locker room guy talk and using homophobic phrases, Archie stands up for Kevin and yells at Julian. Julian continues to talk about the importance of being a man and getting laid with pussy and whatnot, and about how he had sex with a local sex worker named Twyla Twist, who we know from previous seasons as a crime lord and gangster and leader of the Ghoulies? The Gargoyles? I think it was the Ghoulies. Anyway, she was Tony's rival for a while. The point is, she used to be a gangster, but now back in time, she is a sex worker, and Julian bullies Kevin into agreeing to feign heterosexuality and go on a paid encounter with Twyla. And Archie's a little worried about that. And in Veronica's plotline, she is bonding with Clay, and they talk about how they both love movies, and they're not so into television, the drug of a nation. And Clay talks about his dream to study cinema and to make cinema just like his hero, Oscar Michaud, and I appreciated Riverdale using actual history that is meaningful here in this scene. And Veronica says, oh yeah, actually, she kind of would love to work in the movie biz too, behind the camera as well, and maybe they could team up someday. And but they're fantasizing about their futures in cinema are ruptured by the news from the owner of the theater that TV's harming their business, and so is the new drive-in, and there's just not enough people who want to come and see the movie theaters at the Babylonian Theater anymore. But Veronica says, oh, we're going to make a commercial for the theater to play on TV, and it's going to get people to come to the theater. And those of us who have seen some of the clips pre-released before the season came out know what's coming in this plotline. But it's still a hit. It's still a hit. And they really, honestly, they could use some better commercials on the Riverdale TV station. Because from there, oh god, from there, we cut to the Blossoms filming a Maple commercial with Cheryl, No Eyebrows, Julian, and Penelope talking about how great maple syrup is. No mention of the fact that their father was a maple syrup war profiteer. And then they transition to the dancing part of Riverdale Grandstand, and a nice, normal, hot guy named Troy offers to dance with Betty so she doesn't have to dance with fucking Dilton. But then it turns out Troy is a creep, and he just want to ask her about how she got caught stripping, and he harasses her, and he grabs her butt, and she slaps him, and it upsets her parents that she resisted sexual harassment, and so her mom slut shames her because that's what it's called when sluts get shamed. And Betty is getting near the end of her rope. And we all know what happens when Betty gets near the end of her rope. Serial killing. Poor Kevin is very stressed about having to go on this heterosexual sexual encounter with Twyla Twist. And Archie tries to cheer him up, but in the course of doing that, reveals that he's also still a virgin, but nobody cares because he seems straight. And as Kevin points out, that's not fair. And Archie starts to realize, oh, gee, that's not fair. Oh, gee whiz. This episode is a big one for Archie. He finds out about social issues, and it takes a lot out of him. He also gets a little bit gay radicalized, but that's all part of the gay Archie long con. Meanwhile, Jughead signs his confession that he is a writer of comic books and swears he won't write any more scary comic books, with the support of Brad there, playing the part of the dad that he doesn't have, Werther's is a little suspicious of their relationship. He thinks it's a little bit too Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, my loyal ward. Um, but Brad keeps his cool and he threatens to sue the school if they won't let Jughead write at all. And then he suggests it could go all the way to the Supreme Court, and he says Jones v. Board of Education, which is an insane thing to say and an insane reference to make with regards to connecting the pivotal court case that ended school segregation in America to Jughead suing the school so he can keep writing bad horror comics. But that threat that he's going to sue the school and take it all the way to the Supreme Court does buy Featherhead in, and he lets Jughead stay at school. Meanwhile, Kevin has gone to Twyla's, and he is not doing great. He's not into it, and Archie has thoughtlessly just gone to Pop's, where he runs into Betty, and he says something like, "Gosh, Betty, when you were dating Kevin back at the beginning of the season, what was the deal with him?" And Betty, wisely, because she's not a horrible person like Cheryl has been about 900 times, carefully avoids disclosing any specific information about Kevin's sexuality. But then Archie, because he's dumb as a rock, lets slip that Kevin is being forced into a heterosexual encounter with a sex worker due to peer pressure. And Betty freaks out and says, "Archie, you gotta save him." Archie bursts into the hotel room to rescue Kevin from compulsory heterosexuality, but discovers that he has not gone any further with Twyla. He's actually sitting on the bed crying, and Twyla is kind of annoyed. Twyla hits on Archie, but then Archie's like, "Oh gosh, I'm just here to help my friend." And Twyla says, "Oh, he's your friend?" Which is like about the 9th time that Archie has been mistaken for gay with one of his male friends on the show. And Archie, has not noticed. But everyone else noticed. And so Archie rescues Kevin, takes him away from there. He explains to Kevin that, there's a helicopter flying over my house. Archie explains to Kevin that, Betty told Archie the truth about Kevin's sexuality. It's deployed Archie to rescue him, and Kevin is like, "Oh, it doesn't matter that you saved me from compulsory heterosexuality, Archie, because once everybody finds out that the prospect of having sex with a hot older lady made me cry, my life's over." But Archie says, "No, we'll lie together, make it seem like you did the sex, and I'll make sure none of the guys bully you," because Archie's a sweet guy. Despite everything, he's a nice dude. Meanwhile, in Veronica's plotline, she makes a 1950s version of the Nicole Kidman commercial that plays at every AMC theater. If you're like me, then you saw it on Instagram long before now. It's still exactly like that. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because the theater owner's selling the theater. And he's selling it to Veronica's parents? And they're gonna bulldoze it to make a parking lot. And Veronica's enraged. She would never allow anything to happen to a beautiful theater. Also, Destiny demands that she own a business called the Babylonium. And this is a theater called the Babylonium. So she decides to persuade the theater owner to sell to her instead by taking an original Edward Hopper painting that's just hanging up in her house for some reason and trading it to the theater owner for the deed to the theater. Now she owns the Babylonium. She and Clay are going to stay buddies, And she sends her parents a passive aggressive. She sends her parents. Nope, there's another helicopter. She sends her parents a passive aggressive telegram about how she now owns the theater. My best to Uncle Orson, stop. Love her. I've so lost the thread. My health is at an all-time low right now, guys. But I'm pushing through. I'm pushing through. Jughead. Jughead and Brad Rayberry are back at Pops once again for like the third or fourth time this episode. And Brad agrees to mentor Jughead. And you know, he's even feeling a little encouraged um to publish the Jupiter journals. So you know, last episode Jug and Brad were on the outs. This episode they've really reconciled, and finally Jughead will have a reliable father figure who cares about him and is interested in his work. Right? Right. Kevin gets home from this ill-fated rendezvous with Twilight Twist. Finds his father waiting for him. Turns out his father is the one who incepted Julian with the idea to bully Kevin into seeing a sex worker for forced straight sex. And Twyla called Kevin's dad up to say, your son started crying at the prospect of sex with me. Ergo, not allowing for our heroes to lie about Kevin's sexuality. Kevin despairs. Archie is also confronted by Uncle Frank because Kevin's dad has decided to take him off the basketball team since no amount of sports is going to turn him heterosexual. And Archie, to his credit, is very upset by this, although he tries not to explain to Uncle Frank why, which is wise. Archie's really having an awakening, and so he goes to talk to Betty about how he's afraid he just made Kevin's life worse by trying to help him out with the Twyla thing. But Betty reassures him that they did what they could as friends to Kevin, and it's just a messed up situation. And Archie says something like, the world is just so darn unfair, and I'm so proud to see the Archie we knew last season who went on a journey from being a high school sophomore with his own crypto-fascist vigilante group to a heroic union organizer, and then also briefly Christ, but building a railroad Christ. That's the Archie I know. SJW Archie. He's a hero to me. But Cheryl bursts in and interrupts them because that's literally Cheryl's raison d'etre. And gives them a flyer that everybody in the school is invited to tonight's episode of Riverdale Grandstand because it's the 50th episode and they want all the teens in town dancing to show how much they all love their 1950s lives. And Archie's like, gosh, this sucks. All our parents do is tell us what to do and tell us who we can have sex with and tell us how to dress and tell us how to act, and gosh darn it, I wish we could do something for ourselves. And Betty says we can do something for ourselves. So cut to Riverdale Grandstand. We get to see KJ Appa dancing, which I just love it so much. Whenever he's dancing in character as Archie, he's clearly having so much fun. It makes it more fun to be there with him. Beautiful. And it's time to dance the twirl because that's presumably the Riverdale equivalent of the twist. But Betty, who's been forbidden from dancing because she's so damn slutty, breaks in and she twirls so hard you can straight up see her pussy on live TV. Whole ass. And obviously her parents are enraged. Because she showed her whole ass on TV. I mean, she's wearing underpants, but she showed her whole ass on TV. So they have to stop the 50th episode of Riverdale Grandstand halfway through Betty is interrogated and berated by her mother, but she does get to stop being a Riverdale grandstand, so win as far as I'm concerned. And the next day at school, Archie has to hang out with Kevin and Clay, and they're like, "But Arch, we're too gay to play basketball." And Archie's like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm excited to have guy friends I can talk about poetry and theater and movie stars with." Which is like so it's homophobic, but it's also homophiliac. Archie is Archie is walking the thin line that in academic circles they call homosocial. Archie comes up to Kevin and Clay. He's like, "Hey guys, can we homosocialize?" No, I'm gonna be put on trial. Final ending montage of the episode. For showing her pussy on TV, Betty's now a famous hot girl. She's gone from so slutty everyone could mock her to so slutty that everyone is afraid and desirous of her, except Cheryl, who's mad about her ruining Riverdale Grandstand, and Dr. Werther's, who wants to psychoanalyze her because of her sexual manias, and that's where we kind of leave off with Bella. That's where we kind of leave off with Betty. I'm afraid she's going to get rendition to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy, just like Ethel. Jughead is now writing his horror comics under a false name, while he writes Super Duck under his real name. So he has twice as much work, and he's still in school. And he loves having Brad around, and he's got a real father figure, and his life's finally turning around, and that's why we immediately cut to Brad in his apartment, and he hears a knock on the door, and he opens the door, and oh my god, it's an evil milkman! Those of you who don't recall, Ethel claims it was an evil milkman who murdered her parents, so fairly confident Brad's gonna get murdered or at least injured now. As most people that Jughead cares about do. But this is interesting. We have to ponder why the milkman would choose Brad as his next victim. What is the scheme that sends him to kill Ethel's parents and then Brad? Because he's killing, I would say he's killing outsiders and misfits, which is odd since he is allegedly an enemy of the establishment. Or is he? Is he perhaps a puppet of Featherhead, Werther's, Clifford Blossom, all of our various bad guys? Only time will tell us. Also, in all likelihood, because it's Riverdale, there will be a third explanation that makes no damn sense. And next week's promo, I'm so excited about this. Next week's promo is about recruiting a new kid to the basketball team, and that new kid is Reggie. Oh, I love Reggie. I'm so excited. I've missed Reggie so much. Reggie. And the promo already has a soundbite of Veronica being horny for him, and him being like even better than Archie on the basketball team, and hi, I'm Reggie Mantle. Mm, love Reggie. Uh, yes. Thank you, everyone. I am even less coherent than usual today, so I think that wraps this episode. This has been Ween Off the Cuff. I am your Ween.